Well, it's Margaret Moore here at the Institute of Coaching, and I have the unbelievably wonderful pleasure of being able to hang out with Bob Waldinger, who, Bob, I just want to say I wouldn't mind having more of a relationship with you. I don't know if that's appropriate to say on a LinkedIn Live, but
let's do it. I think you mean it totally appropriately, and I'd love it.
I came to one of your Zen events. Bob can talk a little bit about his role as a Zen priest. That's the term, right? I've got that right.
Yeah.
But we're here today really to find out what Bob's thinking about, what you're thinking about, and also spend some time with your new book, The Good Life, because, from my quick read, I think you really want to promote it to everybody's listening, because I think there's a lot there, because we know about this 84-year-old study with 84% participation, which is amazing, but the book brings it alive, right, in a way that most of us haven't absorbed. So maybe we could start by just sharing a little bit about why now for the book, and what's important about the book that you want us all to know.
Well, the why now is really because about 8 years ago, I gave a TED Talk in a tiny auditorium in Boston, and it went viral. It exploded. And what we came to understand was that there was a strong interest in what we know about social connection and how it impacts our health and our happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And that people were really wanting to hear what science could tell us, because we're also worried about social isolation and loneliness, which, as we know, is now epidemic. So I think we were trying to answer a need that has come up because we're also afraid of our increasing isolation from each other.
Yeah, and that is very true, right? I mean, you only have to go to a restaurant now and you see, I mean, it's not even funny anymore. You've got two people, married couples at the dinner table and reading their phones and not talking. And my God, that's a sad thing to watch.
Yeah.
So would you say in general, the quality of relationships has gone downward across the population?
It has. And for people who don't know, one of the things we found in this 85-year study of the same families over all that time was that the people who lived the longest, stayed the healthiest, and were happiest were the people who had more social connections and warmer social connections. So there's this really robust scientific finding, not just from our study, but from many studies that say social connection matters enormously for human thriving. And at the same time, there is this trend that's been going on since the 1950s, particularly in the United States, toward less investment in each other, in socializing, in clubs, in all the ways that we connect with each other.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So going to teeing off from that, did happiness and health in those later years depend on a marriage? Or were there single people that did well too because they had strong family and friend connections? I mean, what did you see there?
There were single people. It was much less common because these were people who came of age in the 1940s and 1950s. And so over 90% of our 724 original participants got married. Many got divorced. Many had some of their lives lived as single people. And what we found is that the people who really leaned into family, to friends, to work relationships, that those people, even though they didn't have partners at some points in their lives, could be quite happy and quite fulfilled.
Right. So because I think what we see today, of course, is just a whole different constellation of ways to live. Right. Single parents, gay families, there's everything out there. So I guess what we're hoping for is that it isn't just a heterosexual marriage that's the answer, that there's many ways to have rich, warm, as you say, warm relationships.
Absolutely. I mean, we've studied now the second generation, the children who
Mm.
are mostly baby boomers. Luckily, many people now are free to be who they are. They can live lives as gay people, live lives in same-sex partnerships. Many people having single lives, quite
Yeah.
happily. But what we find is that uniformly, the happiest, healthiest people prioritize their connections with other people.
Yeah.
And I hope you and I will get to talk about what we know about work as well, because
Well,
it's
I was going to go from there because, well, there's two ways we can go with that. One is how important work relationships are, but I want to take it sideways to purpose and actualization and all of that because and I haven't looked recently at the study, but there was, Gallup had a book on 5 areas of well-being. It's more than 10 years old, but back then, well-being at work counted it was at the top and so you could say maybe a lot of people were getting their relationships at work. But what I wonder is the combination of solid relationships and then expressing yourself and your purpose in your work, doing something meaningful, making a contribution, having a purpose, and how those two things work together. What's your take on that?
well, it really is both. I mean, I think that what people need is some sense that what they're doing is worthwhile. But it doesn't have to be that your actual work is what you dearly love. It could be, for example, that the connections at work are what are most meaningful. So it could be that you have buddies. It could be that you have mentees, right? Or that you are being mentored by someone who you really look up to, and that all of those connections can, in some ways, um, be part of the sense of meaning and purpose you get in your work life. But if we're lucky, we also do something that we care about and that we feel makes a difference in the world.
Right. And you would, I mean, in self-determination theory, the 3 core needs that through which all the others travel, according to, if you talk to Rich Ryan about this, are autonomy, actually first. So I get to choose how I want to live. I live by my values. I have freedom to be me. And then competence, which is that I'm, I can navigate the world and accomplish things. And then relationships that support both.
Yes.
The relatedness there is that my relationships are allowing me to be me and also to get better. So they're supporting that. Do you think that's where, because that's different than just warm connections, that
Yeah.
like I'm
Yeah.
actually able to be myself and
Yes,
mm,
absolutely. And what I would do is add to that. So yes, self-determination is a value. But what we find is that if we remain our whole lives concerned about the self, concerned about I, me, and mine, it's not fulfilling enough. And that the people who really find greater meaning and purpose and nourishment are the people who take account of the well-being of other people.
yeah,
And as the Dalai Lama has said, the wise selfish person takes care of other people, because we know that generosity, giving to others,
yeah,
comes back to us in
yeah,
some
it's
way.
ultimately the most selfish thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
That reminds me of some work Barbara Fredrickson did a long time ago. Um, I haven't looked at it recently, but basically, you can think about positive emotions in 2 ways. One is I feel good, and I just, I'm journalist. With myself, I have a little conversation with myself, Margaret. You have a good life, you have a good marriage,
Right.
But it turns out that when you share the positive emotions with other people, that's where you get the biological impact. Parasympathetic nervous system is awakened. Your brain lights up. You're more creative. So I remember that, and so that perhaps speaks to why you can feel good, but you need the relationship to be able to let that, share that.
And the other side to that is there is something that in Buddhism we talk about as sympathetic joy, where you actually take pleasure and derive joy from other people's successes, from other people's happiness, so that you begin to really feel in your bones that this isn't a zero-sum game. It
Right.
doesn't have to be.
Yeah, and of course that goes against the grain of our I was doing a workshop for a team of like 60, 70 people, and it was on trust. And trust is trust is safety, and safety is, I think, a really important contribution of these close relationships. Because you mentioned that in the book, you feel like you're protected, like you're in a bit of a cocoon, right? In this safe relationship. And I remember someone speaking up and saying, I can't really do that. I really can't wish my competing colleagues well when I need to beat them in order to get my bonus or whatever it was. And I said, that's a really interesting point you're making, because it might be that there's a growth opportunity here for you to get past the need, that they have to do worse in order for me to do well. But that is really, it's everywhere, that
Yeah.
idea.
Well, and there's a growth opportunity for organizations and for leaders. If that person thinks that he or she needs to beat out the other person in order to get their bonus, that means the incentives may need some tweaking in the
Yeah.
organization. What
Culture.
about,
Right. Yeah.
right? What about an incentive that means if you are the best cooperator, if you are the best collaborator, that's what gets you the biggest bonus? What a difference in incentives.
Yeah, that's right. Right. So coming back to work then, because I wanted to explore the kind of purpose, self-actualizing, self-determination side, because that is a strong need. And what we're saying is that they're codependent. Really, we need the relationships to be able to feel safe, so we can go out in the world and do these great things, and then we need to be able to share them. So they're both important. If we then just focus on quality of relationships at work, as opposed to the quality of the work in making you feel useful, can you talk a little bit about that, and maybe even personally how
Sure.
you do that at work?
Sure. So let me go back to the Gallup organization survey that I know you and I have talked about. That they asked 15 million workers all over the world, all ages, demographics, cultures. They asked, do you have a best friend at work? And what that meant was, is there anybody at work who you can talk to about personal matters? Only 30% of workers said they had a best friend. But those 30% were better performers. They were better at working with customers in customer-facing jobs. They were less likely to get injured on the job. They were less likely to leave their job for another opportunity because there were people at work who they cared about, who they wanted to show up for. That's important because many leaders believe that socializing at work is a distraction.
Mhm.
But it turns out it works in exactly the opposite way. And one thing we know is that of the 70% of people who don't have a friend at work, only 1 in 12 of those people report that they're actually engaged in their jobs. So engagement has something to do with having people who matter to you right there on the job. So I'm
Yeah,
gonna,
that's
yeah, I don't, tell me where else to go with this, but I
yeah,
think it's
well,
really,
how do you take it into your work life? I think that would
yeah,
be a little bit about how we can, as coaches,
yes.
bring some of this, because there's a lot to talk about there too.
Absolutely. So I bring it into my work by making it as personal as I can while staying within the bounds of appropriateness, right? So I've learned that I don't ask my younger colleagues, particularly younger women, but even men, I don't ask them about their private lives. I don't say, did you go out with anybody on the weekend, or do you have a partner? No, I don't do that anymore. But I really work to check in with people. How did your move go last weekend? Or, how is this working out for you commuting to downtown Boston? And we talk about in our Zoom meetings, because many of our meetings are on Zoom, we spend a little time talking about things that are more personal. And that matters to people. Also, my research group during the pandemic, we instituted something where we started getting together for lunch outside when the weather would permit, so that we could see each other and be together. So what I find is that the more personal I can make it, including sharing appropriately things about myself, not too much, people value that, right? And it matters. And then we come to matter to each other as people. And what I find is it makes a huge difference in people being willing to go the extra mile. When I say, I'm sorry, I have to ask you to do this on a quick timeline, they rarely push back at all, because they have a sense that I matter to them, they matter to me, and that makes all the difference in the world in performance.
Yeah, so there's a measuring line here that has something to, because you said you might have asked people more questions earlier about their personal lives.
Yeah.
And you dialed it back. So it sounds like what you're saying is that you do enough so they know you truly care, you have their back, you're really concerned about their welfare, right? But a little further might feel intrusive. So how did you set that line at work? Because I think it's not an easy line, right?
I mean, the line for me is mostly about allowing people to choose what to share with me. I mean, because I'm the boss, right? So it's a power differential. So if they share that they have a partner, great. Then I'm allowed to at least kind of casually ask about, how are things going, and is the job working out okay in terms of how you two are making a go of it, But if they don't share with me, I don't ask. And if people share with me that they're having a particular personal situation, right, I will be sure to pay attention to that and be sure to ask, okay, how can we support you? Are there things we can do to help you if you need some time off to take care of this medical situation, whatever it might be? But I wait for them to share,
Right.
rather than asking something that might feel at all intrusive.
Okay, good. So then what do you do that makes them feel comfortable to share? Because you might not get anything that way, right?
I share.
Okay, there you
go. I'll say, I really messed up on that. I'll make it clear that, first of all, I make it clear that I make mistakes, and I tell people how grateful I am when they see something that I've done that isn't right, and they correct it or help me correct it. Like that's a kind of baseline, right? Of thank you for seeing that and pointing it out to us. So you reward people for and for helping me with my vulnerabilities, right? And I'll share some personal things, not too much, but enough so that if people want to reciprocate, they can. When I got COVID, I shared it, and I said, it was miserable, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, right. And that, that did bring in, from our team some empathy, my goodness. Yeah. And it wasn't a good case, right? You said, I don't know if you no, you had a bad. Right. Yeah. So, right. So in that sense, you share like, God, like, I'm struggling with this, and I need some time off and need to reorganize some things, and everybody jumped in your support to help you.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And then, everybody feels good because they want to help. I mean, if we know each other even a little bit, we want to help more. And I think people want to go the extra mile more in their work when they know each other.
Yeah. So the two tips here, important ones, are first, share about yourself the right amount at the right time, right? So it's a carefully calibrated.
Yeah.
And in a way, you're inviting them to step up and help you by sharing some things that are more difficult. So you're helping them help you. And then the second thing is you let them tell you, having created the space, you just shared yours, you let them tell you what you want. And do you think they follow the same kind of guideline, which is they share enough that you can help, or and enough that you feel like you've got some depth of your connection?
Some people do. Many people do. Some people share too much. And often then what I'll do is help them find other kinds of help. Like some people will, and I feel like it's really brave of them, share, I've been depressed. And I don't, I'm a psychiatrist, but I don't work with them on their depression.
Yeah,
I
right.
say, can I help you find some good care for this? And so what we do is we try to keep those boundaries, um, but at the same time, pitch in and help people find what they need. We
Right.
did this actually in our longitudinal study. People would come to us saying, study subjects would come saying, I need a doctor or I need a couples therapist. We would not do the couples therapy. We would help them find a good couples therapist.
Mhm. Yeah, good. Good. So is there anything else you want to say about relationships at work that we should know before we talk about coaching?
Well, I think the one thing that can get missed is that we're all on a spectrum from being introverts to being extroverts. And you don't need to be an extrovert to be a success at relationships, not at all.
Mm.
Extroverts get their energy from other people. Introverts are more likely to get their energy, their refueling from some good alone time. And what we know is that introverts also need people, but they might need just a few, even one close relationship. And that's perfectly normal and perfectly fine. So it's useful to share that because some people may feel like there's something wrong with them if they find having a lot of people in their life stressful.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And we are all on that continuum. Yeah. So moving into coaching, I think those who work in the well-being space are more and more. In fact, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine has now declared, probably in part because of all of your work, that relationships and social connections are a pillar of well-being. So that's been accomplished. So that now gets into those conversations. And then in leadership, you and I were just speaking that, a lot of what we're coaching is in coaching leaders is their relationships and how to work with other people. So it's very central. So are there any things that you'd want us to be thinking about when we're coaching others around this, when it's really the topic on the table?
Yeah. I mean, I think that sometimes it's hard to believe that people don't have the skills we expect them to. And I don't know, coaches may know a lot about this in terms of being with somebody who might be in a powerful position, but be kind of clueless about human beings.
Mm.
And that it's really okay, gently and respectfully, to teach people some of the basics. Um, and perhaps that's on my part stating the obvious, but it may not be because on
Right.
the one hand, we can assume that if somebody's really bright and really accomplished in the world, that of course they have people skills. But it turns out that that's not necessarily the case. And so to pay attention to that and to supplement when you can with some gentle teaching of some of the basic skills is something that many people will be grateful for.
Yeah. So, what's really wonderful about what you're saying is that you're really asking coaches not to judge others for not having good relational skills. Because as coaches, we are relational people, right?
Yeah.
And we know how to start a conversation. We know how to, engage people, get them talking, and so it comes natural, or it comes naturally. We've learned, but you're saying there's so many people that are not naturally good at that, and that the place to start from is, non-judgmental acceptance and appreciation that they're doing the best they can, and it's an opportunity to help.
Absolutely. And you know, and as you coaches know well, to help people see those instances where they've done something well and reinforce that. Oh, you worked that out really well with this person in your organization, and show them how they did it. Because often it's making explicit these skills that we take for granted because we started learning them when we were tiny. You know, we learn them in our families, we learn them on the playground. And so some people need to have the rules of relationships be made more explicit as adults, rules that we've come to take for granted.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm going to tee off on one of the questions, and I'm sorry, guys, I've not been able to read everything. And so this is one I picked up on. Then I have one more question. I'm going to put both on the table because we've got 5 minutes left. So one is, so as a psychiatrist, you obviously are creating connection, trusting relationships all the time, right? And quickly. Are there any tips you could share with us around what you do with your patients, clients, to establish connection quickly? And then the second is on the later in life part of the Harvard study, I wonder whether the quality of relationships actually and the importance of those is more important in later years than younger years. So I want to just get at those two things because I think that, there's a lot of data around that, but is that because it's even more important? So those are the two.
Okay, so the first one is how to create
Quick
connections
connection, yeah.
quickly. And I would say, the obvious, listening, and particularly active listening, like literally nodding, uh-huh, reflecting back gently, not interrupting. Uh,
Mm.
and also, what I've found is that when someone is coming and talking about a problem, because I'm a psychiatrist, people will come because something's wrong. I will often say, tell me some things you're proud of. And often people feel so heartened when they get to tell you what they're happy with, what they feel good about, especially when they're telling you about something that they don't feel so good about. So allow people to share both.
Mhm.
Um, so those are probably the quick pointers I would give.
Right. Okay, good. Yeah, and that sharing of something good is the thing that makes, that's helpful. Good. And then on the importance of relationships, in the last few decades compared to earlier.
Well, I would say that they are important in all decades. And one of the things that shocks me is that the loneliest age group in the United States is age 16 to 24.
Hmm.
I mean, which is hard to believe because yes, loneliness goes up again after age 75, but young people have a lot of trouble with relationships. So I would say that
Mm.
we don't want to say they're more important at any particular age group, but you're absolutely right that they can be called into question as we get older because, we work with people who are thinking about retirement, or they have just retired, or they've moved into a community that's new, a retirement community, for example. All of those disruptions of our usual work days, our usual networks of relationships can mean that suddenly people have to stop and say, wait, how do I make new connections? And so, in that sense, older adults often are facing the prospect of needing more connection because of life transitions that they're making.
Yeah, right. So you're really commenting on the two phases of life where people are more prone
Yeah,
to feel isolation, and so then it stands out more. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, in our last minute, what would be your final final words of wisdom for all of us today?
I would say just for yourselves, as coaches, take stock in your own life. I mean, that's what I did. I pay much more attention now to reaching out to friends, to having dinners with my guy friends in a way that I didn't before I started doing this research.
Really?
Like, make these things a priority in your own life and then keep asking the people you coach to think about it and to do actions day in, day out that connect them regularly with the people who are important to them.
Yeah. So these true, authentic, warm connections are the nourishment of our days, not a luxury. They're
Yeah, not a
really,
luxury.
Yeah.
And they're not heavy lifting. They require
Yeah.
repeated small actions.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I think that brings us way too quickly to the end of our 30 minutes, Bob. And I just want everyone to know that Bob's going to be with us at our conference on the it's the 4th of May. You're coming on the Saturday. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to everyone joining us at the conference. Bob, we can't wait to see you in person, because that is a better way to connect. And all the best to everybody here from all over the world.
And thank you. This was great fun.
Thank you, Bob. Yes, always.